Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. We have a new champion in the heavyweight division, with the WBA elevating Robert Helenius to its gold champion. So the WBA restores itself to having 4 champions. Robert Helenius being one, Trevor Bryan, the interim champ, regular champion Manuel Cha, and the super champion, who's the legitimate champion, Anthony Joshua. So the WBA, not wanting to have the gold champion status vacant, for whatever reason, elevates Robert Helenius into that position. So in this video, I'll talk about that, but also the rankings update for the WBA, which has just occurred. The latest update is out, and this is where I discovered Robert Helenius has been elevated to gold champion. So there's a bit to sort of go through with that, but also Efe Ajagba comes into the WBA rankings for the first time. And Adam Kownacki, you would have thought after his recent loss to Robert Helenius, he might be tumbling down the rankings, but not so, only falling a couple of places. So starting with Robert Helenius, because this was the thing that caught my eye when I saw the latest update, he has been elevated to gold champion status. And I know some people will be asking, well, hang on, wasn't Joe Joyce the gold champion? Well, he was until recently, and then it was listed as vacant a couple of months ago, and then the following month, it had Joyce back in there, but with an asterisk next to his name, and then he was gone altogether, and now Robert Helenius takes that spot. So how has he got there? Well, he fought Adam Kownacki on March the 7th, stopped Kownacki in, 5 rounds or so, and yeah, he is now the gold champion. I was expecting he would just be bumped up the rankings. So that, with Kownacki, was an eliminator, but an eliminator for whose belt within the WBA was the real question. There was a lot of media just saying that he was going to eventually fight Anthony Joshua, that he would become the mandatory, but I don't think that is actually the case. I haven't heard the WBA say that, and with him now being elevated to being gold champion, I think in my view it's more likely that he will just fall down that rabbit hole that would be facing the winner of Trevor Bryan and Manuel Cha. I think what's going to happen is Helenius will get tied up with that, and he won't be facing Anthony Joshua. And there was nothing that anyone from Fox and other reporters were saying in terms of Robert Helenius facing an Anthony Joshua that was actually based in fact or anything from the WBA. So that situation still to play out. I'm interested to see where that goes, because what often happens in the WBA, because it becomes such a minefield to navigate, even if you're high in the rankings, you can just get bogged down. So I think Robert Helenius now being the gold champion will go pretty much nowhere fast. So this really is a little bit of a surprise, but clearly they wanted to have the gold champion spot filled. But it wasn't on the line for the Kownacki fight. I want to make that clear. It was just an eliminator in the WBA. There was no talk about gold champion status, but obviously something has happened behind closed doors, and Helenius is elevated and he's now above the rankings. One of 4 champions that the WBA recognizes. And why do they have so many champions? Well, they're greedy. They want a whole bunch of sanctioning fees, and it's about as simple as that. So going forward, Robert Helenius, being a champion with that status, will have to pay a lot more in sanctioning fees for holding that honor. So to some degree, he's a world champion according to the WBA, but like Joe Joyce, who held that after beating Berman Stavern, no one really classed Joyce as a champion, and ultimately he vacated the belt at some point. Never got to the bottom of that situation. I did ask Sam Jones via Twitter what happened with that belt in that situation, and he was quite coy with what was going on, but clearly he vacated it or was stripped it, or whatever happened, it doesn't really matter. But Helenius, now the gold champion as it were. But let's make our way through the rest of the rankings. So not a lot of change in the top 15. You can see here on screen, this is the list. So Trevor Bryan was meant to be facing Manuel Cha. I mean, who knows when that's going to happen. Both those guys, horrifically inactive, have been holding their respective belts hostage. Deontay Wilder firm at number 2, as is Alexander Usyk at number 3. Luis Ortiz, he climbs one spot this month. Adam Kownacki had been at number 4, and he was looking likely that if he won that eliminator against Helenius, that eventually he was going to either be in a final eliminator or potentially be a mandatory challenger to Anthony Joshua at some point. But best laid plans and all that, he got stopped in 5 rounds by Helenius. So he has fallen. I'll come to him in a moment. But Andy Ruiz is up one spot this month to 5. He takes over from where Ortiz was. Ortiz bumped up one, as I mentioned, to number 4. And Adam Kownacki, after having been stopped by Helenius, falls just the 2 places. Which is interesting because he was dropped out of other sanctioning bodies, or at least dropped down quite far down other top 15s. But not so in the WBA, where it actually seems like if you lose, that doesn't really matter too much. Because if you think about the names that I've just mentioned, Adam Kownacki, Luis Ortiz and Andy Ruiz, who occupy, the spots 4 to 6. They're all coming off a loss, but still maintaining very high rankings. And the Ortiz one, in the past year or so, he's only fought Christian Hammer, and then he had a loss to Deontay Wilder, but he's been climbing in the WBA rankings. Doesn't quite make sense, does it? And Kownacki not really penalised too much, only dropping the 2 places. So number 7, Alexander Povetkin, he takes over from where Robert Helenius was. Helenius above the rankings. Michael Hunter, Derek Chisora up a spot each as well. Kubrat Pulev, he rises 2 places. And with his fight coming up with Anthony Joshua, don't be surprised if Pulev in the next few months ahead of whenever that fight is going to be, he's at 10th spot at the moment. Don't be surprised him actually climbing up somewhere, in the top 6, somewhere there or thereabouts. He won't stay at 10, he won't stay lowly here, because if he contests for the title, the sanctioning body will have him as high as possible. Ajit Kabayal is at 11. He holds firm there. At number 12, the first time Efe Ajagba has been ranked in the WBA. So he comes in at number 12. He fought Razvan Kajanu on March 7th. That was on the undercard of Helenius and Kownacki. Looked decent against Kajanu. It wasn't a stunning performance, but it was a good learning fight. And overall, he looks like he's improving. So now he is ranked in 2 sanctioning bodies, also in the WBC, which he also just entered recently for the first time. Sergey Kuzmin, Mladen Malas, they hold firm at 13 and 14, and eternally in the WBA rankings at 15 here is Fraser Kendo. So we'll see what happens with the situation with Kendo. He's still owed a title shot from a court order from a few years ago, and he is an immovable object at this point. His case, at least this is what he's been saying in public and on social media, is that the WBA should just make him a champion. Whereas obviously the WBA doesn't want to do that, because if they did, they would have done that a couple of years ago. But he is owed a title shot, whether that ever happens or not. Who knows? He's just had a birthday recently, I believe, and fast approaching 50. What do you make of it all? Robert Helenius, a new heavyweight champion. Efe Ajagba works his way into the WBA rankings for the first time. Adam Kownacki only drops the 2 places. And Luis Ortiz, Andy Ruiz and Kownacki, despite losses, still riding high in the WBA rankings. Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.